another trophy for your collection, I see.
This is one that nobody else has.
The final outlaw of Hollywood, Clint Eastwood, appears on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote his upcoming film. However, what begins as a routine interview escalates into a heated argument that forces him out of the studio. How did a straightforward talk show segment turn chaotic? Let's get started. If this is your first visit, click the subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from in a comment. Who has tuned in for this wild ride? Let's find out. The studio of Jimmy Kimmel Live is buzzing. The crowd was roaring with excitement, the lights shining. The night's main draw is Clint Eastwood, who is well into his 90s. His mere presence is enough to silence the room. He is here to promote his most recent movie, a stark drama about a rancher who resists a corporate land grab. A narrative that is as much about the character as it is about him. His squint and gravelly voice are still deadly. However, Clint dislikes the talk show game because of the forced laughs and polished scripts. One reason he agreed to this was to spread the word. Any other questions? He is also not playing. Trouble is already brewing backstage. Maggie, Clint's assistant, a straightforward woman who has been by his side for years, is aware of it. "Don't turn him into a circus act," she said, in a low, firm voice earlier to the producers. They gave a nod, but their eyes said otherwise. They were plotting for clicks and a viral moment to cash in on his legend. They want him to cooperate, perhaps tossing a prop or making a self-deprecating joke. Maggie is aware of this. Clint never flexes, not for studios or anyone else. They will bear the cost of the producer's disregard for her. Clint is enjoying a cup of black coffee in the green room while he watches a monitor as Jimmy Kimmel starts the show. The crowd roars as Jimmy cuts through the most recent celebrity meltdowns in his monologue. The chair is lightly rubbed by Clint's fingers, who maintains the same expression. Like a gunfighter before a draw, he's giving a subtle sign that he's evaluating the situation, which Maggie observes. She says to a stagehand, "They're going to try something," and the stagehand just shrugs. Clint gets up, straightens his jacket, and heads for the curtain when the stage manager announces that it is time. Alone, no haste. The stage is something else entirely. While Jimmy is rapping about a singer's outburst in public, the audience is right on cue, laughing. He shifts gears and hypes Clint's arrival. Clint Eastwood, the man, the myth. A savage riff is laid down by the band. Clint emerges from the crowd with a slow, deliberate walk that suggests he is asserting control of the space. After giving Jimmy a brief, firm handshake, he sits with his frame taut and his eyes scanning the set. The cheers die down, and the air gets tighter. There are now just the two of them, and the crowd is barely audible. At first, Jimmy plays it safe and asks about the movie's roots in loyalty and sticking to your guns. Clint talks about the rancher, the land, and the fight against greed as he leans in, his voice rough but steady. Like a hammer, every word hits the ground. The weight of his conviction gripped the audience. However, Jimmy has a show to run, so he wants to do something trendier and lighter. He makes a joke about Clint's days as a cowboy and asks if he still rides horses. When it matters, Clint's response is concise and clipped. Jimmy misses the edge in his tone, which causes the crowd to laugh. Jimmy tries to change the subject by using a story from Clint's past, sensing that the time is passing. Something about a fight in a bar while filming a Western. He's looking for a funny story or a reminiscence. Clint's jaw is tight and his eyes are small. He says, his voice cutting through the studio hum, "Didn't happen." There are both gasps and uneasy giggles from the crowd. Jimmy smiles, thinking he can make things better, but he didn't see the room right. Clint, on the other hand, goes all out and grabs a cheap cowboy hat as a gag prop. "Have at it, Clint." He waves it. One quick shot for the fans. Applause from the audience encourages it. However, Clint does not move. He had a piercing stare. He says, "Put that away." Not very loudly, but every syllable is heard. The studio shuts down. Jimmy cracked a smile. Observing from the wings, Maggie shakes her head. The ugly part is about to start. The studio's silence is deafening. A prolonged pause that resembles the time before a storm breaks out. With a thin, forced laugh, Jimmy Kimmel tries to laugh it off while still wearing the cowboy hat. All right. He throws it on the desk and says, "No hats tonight." But the crowd is nervous, and their earlier cheers are now barely audible. Clint Eastwood's eyes are fixed on Jimmy, and he has not moved, appearing to be staring at a rattlesnake. The kind of tension that makes your skin tingle can be felt. Maggie's hands are clenched backstage. She said, in a sharp whisper, "Told you not to push him," to the stage manager. Sweating, the stage manager commands the control booth to cut to commercial. However, the director is not yet ready to leave. They're getting the drama they want. Jimmy, sensing that he is losing control, attempts to return to the interview by shifting in his chair. He says, his voice a little brighter than usual, "So let's talk more about the film," as if he is trying to reset the room. In the hope of bringing things back to more secure ground, he inquires about the motivation behind the rancher's story. Clint starts talking as he leans forward with his hands on his knees. However, it is not the response Jimmy expected. Clint says in a low, deliberate voice, "It's about people who don't roll over. People who fight when the outside world tries to take what belongs to them. Not about dressing up for the sake of amusement." A few gasps are mixed with scattered clapping as the punch hits the audience hard. Jimmy's smile tightens as he taps the desk with his fingers. The host tries to keep things moving, asking about the film's production, but Clint's not done. His tone has become sharper since he abruptly enters. He says, "You know, I came here to talk about something real," focusing on the set, the lights, and the crowd with his eyes. "Not to be a gimmick to boost your ratings." The crowd stirs, some cheering, others whispering, unsure whether this is part of the act. Jimmy's usual quick wit fails him when he is caught off guard. He gives the floor producer a glance, who is signaling to end it, but Clint is on a roll and won't stop. "I've been in this game longer than you've been alive," he tells Jimmy, his voice steady but edged with fire. "To sell a story, I don't need to play your games." Now, the audience is divided. Some are cheering Clint on, while others are heckling, thinking it's all a show. Jimmy leans in with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes as he tries to regain control. "Hey, we're just having fun here, Clint." "No need to get heated," he says, but the words sound hollow. In the hope of flattering Clint into calming down, he takes a different approach and inquires about his method of directing. However, Clint is not biting. "Fun?" he says, his voice full of contempt. "You mean it's fun? Escorting people here to make them look stupid?" He points to the set, including the bright lights and the entire machine. Again, the crowd is buzzing louder, taking in the raw energy. The producers are in a state of panic backstage. The director is in the booth giving instructions to prepare for a commercial break. However, the ratings are rising, and someone in a higher position wants to let it play out. Maggie is pacing and murmuring about how she was aware that this would occur. She knows Clint won't back down when she sees his granite-like face on the monitor. Jimmy is stumbling around on stage, and his jokes don't work. He tries to change the subject to something more light-hearted by asking Clint about his favorite role from the past. But Clint cuts him off once more. He says, his voice rising just enough to be heard, "You don't get it. It's not about me in this. Respect for the work and the people watching is at the heart of it. Some people stand and clap, while others boo. The crowd roars. A keg of powder in the room. Jimmy is finished. He gives up his nice guy persona and leans forward, his voice now sharper. He says, gesturing to the audience, "Look, Clint, we're just trying to give the fans what they want. They cherish you. They would like to see the myth. It is a mistake." Clint leans in, his voice low but sharp, as his eyes flash. A clown is not what they want. They want to know the truth. For a brief moment, the studio seems to hold its breath as the words hang in the air. Then from behind, a heckler shouts something that is hard to understand, but it is enough to break the spell. Jimmy seizes the opportunity, rising to his feet and clapping his hands. "All right, folks, we'll take a brief break." He says it to make himself laugh. The band starts, but Clint doesn't move, his eyes on Jimmy, and the crowd is nervous because they think this isn't over. The band is trying to drown out the chaos by playing loud and brassy music, but it doesn't work. The studio for Jimmy Kimmel Live is a live wire. The crowd was frantic, with some shouting for Jimmy to fight back and others cheering for Clint Eastwood. Jimmy is standing and clapping like everything is fine while forcing a smile. However, he turns to look at the floor producer, who is frantically signaling for the show to end at commercial. However, the cameras are still rolling, documenting this train wreck in its entirety. Jimmy's silent challenge is louder than the music because Clint hasn't moved from his chair. Backstage, Maggie is cursing and looking at the monitor, knowing that Clint is not finished. Ratings are at an all-time high, and the director in the booth is torn. However, this is out of control. Jimmy sits again as the band ends, leaning toward Clint. He speaks low and off-mic, but the audience is close enough to hear some of it. "Let's just keep it cool. Are you okay?" In an effort to salvage the conversation, he says, "We'll talk about the movie." Clint doesn't blink. He says, his voice sharp as a knife, "You had your chance, just loud enough for the front row to hear." The crowd stirs, phones out, recording the moment, already spreading online. Jimmy's jaw clenches. He doesn't like being challenged like this, especially not on his own turf. He decides to play to the crowd after looking at them to see how they are feeling. "People, Clint is adored, right?" he says, eliciting applause by raising his hands. There is scattered clapping from some. It is impossible to unite the room. Clint's face is obscured as he leans back and crosses his arms. He is not coming to win over the crowd. He's here to say something. Jimmy is commanded to wrap it by the stage manager, who is perched close to the wings. However, Jimmy is hesitant to let go of it. He picks up a cue card, inquires about the film's cast, and praises Clint's direction as a final attempt to rebalance the situation. However, Clint was fed up with the script. He says, "You're not listening," interrupting Jimmy mid-sentence. The murmurs are silenced by his carry voice, which is not particularly loud. "The movie is no longer the focus of this. It has to do with your belief that you can use me as a prop for your show." The crowd sputters. Some people yell, "Tell him, Clint," while others boo, the gap getting wider. Now Jimmy's face is flushed and his smile is gone. He has been in precarious situations before, but this one is unique. In front of millions, this is Clint Eastwood calling him out. He makes an effort to laugh, but it sounds forced. "Stop it, man." "It's just television," he says, waving his hands to the audience. "We're all here to have fun," they say. Clint gives a deliberate, slow head shake. He says, "Not me. I came to talk about a significant topic. You transformed it into a spectacle." The crowd explodes, half cheering and half yelling, swallowing the set as the words hit like a punch. In the wings, Maggie nods to herself with a grim expression of satisfaction. She has witnessed Clint defeat greater egos than this. In the end, the director calls it. The break for commercials begins. Ads that flash on the monitors. The house lights dim slightly as the band stops, indicating a pause. However, Clint remains motionless in his chair, like a defiance-carved statue. With sharp, irritated gestures, Jimmy stands and whispers something to the producer on the floor. Some members of the audience are yelling Clint's name, while others are arguing among themselves. Two muscular men in black are watching Clint as security gets closer to the stage. However, they are hesitant. He is known to them. Maggie takes a step forward and grabs the stage manager by the arm. She yells, "Don't even think about touching him," her voice low but ferocious. The stage manager backs off with a nod, but the tension keeps rising. The producers gather in a huddle during the break, their voices raised to try to save the show. Jimmy is muttering to himself while pacing near the desk and running his hand through his hair. He is aware that he is losing, but he is unsure of how to turn things around. In the meantime, Clint sits calmly and drinks water brought in by a stagehand. He looks around the room and scans the crowd. In an effort to pique his interest, a few front-row fans lean forward, with one shouting, "You're the man, Clint." He gives a sly nod of approval. Nothing further. The director has decided to let Clint stay, but Jimmy needs to take control now that the break is almost over. The cameras resume filming. The band cues up, and Jimmy forces himself back to the desk, his face a mask of professionalism. However, Clint is prepared for round two. And he isn't here to be nice to you. As the Jimmy Kimmel Live audience settles, their murmurs are a low hum of anticipation. The studio lights return to full brightness, and the band's final notes fade. Like a man returning to a boxing ring after a rough round, Jimmy Kimmel settles into his chair as the cameras resume rolling. His smile is practiced but strained. Clint Eastwood has remained seated, his posture unchanged, and his eyes are fixed somewhere past Jimmy, as if the host is nothing more than a distraction. There is a split in the energy of the crowd, with some chanting for Clint and others waiting for Jimmy to make a comeback. Maggie is standing backstage, arms crossed, watching. Her expression a mix of pride and worry. The producers are trembling. Through headsets, the director's voice crackled, "Keep it tight, Jimmy. Don't let him take charge." To refocus the room, Jimmy leans forward and claps once. He says, with a lighter tone than before, "We're back with the one and only Clint Eastwood." In an effort to change the mood, he asks about the film's cinematography in the hope of establishing Clint's expertise. However, Clint isn't here for the softballs. He responds with a steady voice, talking about the stark visuals and the way the land is a character in itself. He then shifts gears on his own. "What's wrong with places like this?" I asked. He says, while pointing to the set. "You believe that it's all about making noise and flash. You lose track of the real." The crowd shakes, with some clapping and others uncomfortable shifting. Jimmy's eyes flicker with irritation, but he maintains his composure and nods as if he understands. Jimmy says, leaning back in an effort to sound like a gracious host, "Fair enough. However, this is entertainment, isn't it? A show is wanted by people. He makes a gesture to the crowd, hoping for help, and he gets both cheers and jeers. Clint doesn't even blink. He says, his voice cutting through the background noise, "They want honesty, not a polished lie you feed them to keep them cheering." The crowd immediately responds to the words with a roar of approval from some, and jeers from others as they land like a slap. As he grasps the desk with his fingers, Jimmy's smile falters. He is aware that he is losing the room. The floor producer gives the signal to change things, but Jimmy doesn't back down now that his pride is involved. He takes a different approach, leaning in and speaking more clearly. "Clint, you're a legend, look at you. That's not up for debate. However, you are on my stage, and we must perform." The audience feels it as a direct challenge, and their noise rises in response. The slight enlargement of Clint's eyes is enough to make the air feel heavier. "What's your stage?" He says it deliberately in a low voice. "I have decided to be here, not to dance in your honor." The crowd explodes, with some standing and yelling Clint's name, while others demand Jimmy back off. In the wings, Maggie mutters, "Here we go," while shaking her head. With their hands twitching, the security guards get closer, but they still keep back because they don't want to look bad. Jimmy is finished. He points at Clint while standing, contravening the host's fundamental rule to remain seated. "Do you wish to discuss respect? Respect the people who invited you here, perhaps?" Now that his nice guy mask is off, his voice is loud. The crowd's on its feet, the noise deafening, a mix of cheers and boos swallowing the set. When Clint stands up, he does so slowly and carefully, and his height and presence fill the stage. Even though he doesn't speak up, every word is heard. As he gets closer to Jimmy, he says, "Respect is earned, not purchased with cheers and lights." The studio shakes as a result of the audience losing it. The director calls for a cut while yelling in the booth, but the cameras keep rolling, capturing the moment. Clint uses Jimmy's show as a battlefield. There is a lot of noise in the studio of Jimmy Kimmel Live. As Clint Eastwood and Jimmy Kimmel stand side by side, inches apart, with the air between them crackling, the crowd's cheers and boos crash like waves. Respect's earned, not bought with lights and applause. Clint's words still ring true, and the audience takes pleasure in their unadulterated defiance. Jimmy is caught between rage and the need to save his show, with a flushed face and clenched fists. Despite the director's frantic orders, the cameras keep rolling, broadcasting every second to the stunned home audience. Backstage, Maggie is focused on Clint with a fierce expression, ready to intervene if things get worse. Uncertain of how to handle a legend like Eastwood, the two security guards, who are now at the edge of the stage, exchange glances. First, Jimmy breaks the impasse by stepping back and forcing a laugh that sounds more like a cough. In an effort to regain control, he says, his voice tight, "All right, Clint, you've made your point." In an effort to rouse the crowd, he makes gestures at them. "Let's give Clint Eastwood it, people." Some people clap, but the shouts drown out the applause because the room is too charged to settle. Clint doesn't say anything about it because he's still looking at Jimmy as if he's considering whether to say anything else. Sweating, the floor producer yells, "Get him off now," as he signals security to enter. One of the guards steps forward and extends a hand to Clint after the others pause. He says, "Sir, let's take a walk," with a cautious and respectful tone. Clint turns and fixes his gaze on the guard. The stage appears to freeze for a brief moment, and the audience holds its breath. Clint says in a low voice, "Don't." A command, not a threat. The guard comes to a stop, raises his hands, and then walks away. With her voice cutting through the noise, Maggie pushes through the wings. She yells, glaring at the producer, "He's leaving when he's ready." However, Clint raises his hand and silences her. He looks at Jimmy and then the audience with no expression. His voice is steady as he tells the room, "I said what I came to say." Final. The audience erupted in a mix of applause and stunned murmurs as he abruptly turned and left the stage, his stride deliberate and slow. The band is scrambling to play anything to make up for Jimmy's absence. He waves to the crowd and makes himself smile. "Well, that was interesting, isn't it?" Trying to make it into a joke, he says it in a shaky voice. The laughter from the audience is uneven and scattered. The producers are in disarray backstage, and the director is yelling about damage control. Meanwhile, Maggie follows Clint to the green room, where he calmly grabs his coat. She murmurs, "Told him not to push you." Clint simply nods, his eyes moving away from it. The internet is exploding outside, footage of the fight going viral, critics and fans taking sides. Jimmy rushes through the next segment, his usual charm off-kilter as the show limps to its conclusion. Everything is overshadowed by the story of Clint's departure, which will be discussed for years. The night a legend refused to participate in the game when he appeared on a talk show. It is evident that Clint did not simply leave. Rather, he drew a line as he walks into the night, the studio behind him rife with conflict, one that will never be forgotten by Hollywood. People, that is the story. Wow, what a wild ride. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please click the subscribe button to receive additional stories of this kind. We are creating a community that values real things. Please indicate in the comments section below where you are watching. Perhaps Tokyo, Los Angeles, or a remote location. What do you think? Did Clint have the right to maintain his position, or did he go too far? If you liked the video, please show it to your friends. I'll see you in the next one. I'm out if you keep being real and curious.